Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wall Street from Main Street podcast. Mo is here, and today's guest is a returning guest, Doug Casey. He's the best-selling author, entrepreneur, and philosopher. He recently co-authored a new book called The Speculator, which we will discuss in this podcast. Before we get into the podcast, we have to give a shout-out to our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by Grant Stone Shoes, and they are run by a family of third-generation shoemakers, which make classic Goodyear welt shoes using full-grain leather. Now, Jason and I own a pair, and we love them. So we worked out a special offer with Grant Stone Shoes for our listeners. So when you go to grantstoneshoes.com, you can enter the promo code GOLD, and you get 10% off any purchase. Now, if you don't believe our feedback, you can Google Grant Stone Shoes and look at the reviews from other people if you don't believe it. So check that out. So, Doug, how you doing?
Good, Mo. It's nice to talk to you again.
Same here. It's been a long time since we have you back on, and hopefully we will have you back on more regularly than once every year or so. But I want to get into an article that you released today on internationalman.com. You stated that the Great Depression is going to be worse than you thought. Why did you say that?
Well, the inevitable is now becoming the imminent. And the reason that you have a depression is it's a period of time when distortions and misallocations of capital in an economy are liquidated. And because of what the government, not just the American government, but actually the Europeans, the Chinese, the Japanese, and all these little countries have done the same thing, rather than let the economy wash out and let weak players fail and reallocate their assets to stronger players, they've printed up trillions and trillions of new currency units. Not only that, but they've reduced interest rates to zero and even below zero. And I thought that was metaphysically impossible, quite frankly. So that these are the same things, to a much lesser degree, that happened during the 1920s and caused the boom that they had then. So that all this debt that's been created as a result of this currency creation, I don't think it can ever be repaid. There are going to be a lot of bankruptcies. There's going to be a gigantic amount of unemployment. All the governments are bankrupt in the world. All the banks are bankrupt in the world. So I think we're leaving the eye of the storm that we entered in 2007 now, and it's going to be very, very tough going. So that's a brief summary of my position.
Yeah, the central banks have been printing $180 billion per month just to keep the economy and market propped up. And I've said this in podcasts before. I don't think we ever been through this global money printing before in history. Do you agree?
Oh, nothing even remotely resembling the scale that we see now. And the worst part of this, actually, there are no good things about it, but the worst part of it is that the rich are getting richer, in fact, because of this, because the rich have the legal connections, they have the accounting expertise, they have all the connections that are needed to make sure that they stand very, very close to the fire hose of money that's coming from these central banks. So they get to drink their fill first. And this is why the richer are, in fact, getting richer. And people are blaming this on the free market and capitalism, where, in fact, it's caused by just the opposite. It's caused by government action in these central banks.
Yeah, and the QE program, the money printing, the 0% interest, all the stimulus package that they put out, that's benefiting the 1%. It's not helping Main Street, and that's contributing to the income inequality that we're having right now. It's not the Wall Street greed. Well, it is. Part of that reason is Wall Street greed, because they want the Federal Reserve to keep bailing them out and keep interest rate low. But a lot of it is due to the government and their unintended consequences.
That's right. This absolutely cannot end well. So I urge listeners to take advantage of the relatively calm markets that we're in right now to kind of gird up their financial loins, as you might say. And the way you do that, I think that you ought to buy gold and to a lesser degree buy silver with any cash that you have at this point. Also, stay out of debt, because this could result in a deflationary collapse as easily as much higher levels of inflation. It's unpredictable at this point, which it'll be still. Although in the long run, I think inflation is going to win.
Yeah, and a lot of people are predicting a market crash is around the corner, but who knows when that's going to happen. It could happen tomorrow, it could happen next month, it could happen next year, or 5 years from now.
Yes, that's quite correct, although I've got to say that earnings of the market have been going down for over a year. Meanwhile, the price-earnings ratio has been going up. So stocks have been getting more and more expensive, even while earnings have been dropping. In addition to that, we're not just in a bond bubble, we're in a bond super bubble. And interest rates will head up at some point. And, of course, prices of bonds fluctuate the opposite of interest rates. It's inverse. So that if interest rates were to double now from, let's say, 2% to 4%, long-term bonds would fall nearly 50%. This would be devastating. So the worst thing you can do is own bonds at this moment. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And those used to be considered risk-free investment, but they're not anymore.
Now, bonds are a triple threat to your capital. First of all, you've got the interest rate risk, which is huge at this point. At this point, I think interest rates can only go higher. Then you've got the currency risk, whether it's the U.S. dollar or some other currency that the bond is denominated in. The currencies are going to get weaker as these governments print more of it. And then last is the default risk. There's no guarantee that a government won't default on its bonds. I mean, the most famous recent example was Argentina, of course, but it could happen anywhere, including here in the U.S.
So I want to ask you a listener question, and we're talking about government debt and bonds, so I want to stay on that and ask one of our listeners' questions, if you don't mind. His question is, why can't the government issue zero yielding debt, which the Fed can continue to buy, since the Fed can create money they never need to be paid back? Hence, government debt is effectively written off, although it's kept on the book. The government can then do deficit spending to keep the economy growing.
Well, in fact, the government can issue 0% interest debt and have the Federal Reserve buy it. But the mechanics of the way this works is that, and right now the U.S. government is running $500 to $600 billion a year deficit. And that's using cash accounting, not accrual accounting, which all businesses have to use. But put it this way, if the government issues $100 billion of debt, such as the questioner asks, the way it works is the Federal Reserve takes that bond, that government bond, into its balance sheet and credits the U.S. government at commercial banks with the $100 billion, which the U.S. government can spend for whatever it needs or wants to spend things on. So this is the actual engine of inflation. This is how new money gets into the economy. The reason we haven't seen very high levels of inflation so far is because commercial banks are not making the kind of loans to consumers and to businesses that they have in the past. That's the real super money. It's the fractional reserve the multiplier factor. So we haven't seen that much of it. So even though the government's been creating lots of money, it hasn't been expanded by the so-called private sector.
Yeah, and the big bank are right now they're just speculating on derivative and trading and high frequency trading to gain yield right now rather than investing back into the economy.
Yes. Now this is just going to end very badly. I mean, I don't know when, but I actually think that we're going back into the storm now. It's long overdue, in my opinion. We'll have to see what happens. And, of course, there are a lot of other things that can go wrong along the way. I mean, it seems like they're plumping to start World War III against the Russians and or the Chinese and or the Iranians and who knows who else. Very scary.
Yeah, it is very scary when you see these presidential candidates and the current administration and the tension between China, Russia, and the U.S. and other countries as well, and then what's going on in Syria as well could lead us to another world war. I hope not, but we'll see what happens.
Well, they're talking about a no-fly zone over Syria, which means that American and British planes can fly over Syria, but the Russians aren't allowed to. And I don't think the Russians are going to put up with that. So it is quite possible that you could have the Russians and the Americans in air battles over Syria. And who knows where that ends. So.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's very scary. And that's not very good if they want to do a no-fly zone. A no-fly zone is pretty much an act of war in my book.
No, it's incredibly stupid. I mean, the Americans shouldn't be in Syria to start with. These people over there have to sort this out for themselves, even though we caused the problem. I mean, all of the problems in the Middle East were caused directly by the Americans. But the best thing that the Americans could do at this part is just walk away from it, quite frankly. They're just making it worse by being there.
Yeah, I agree. I've been advocating for the U.S. to stop intervening in the Middle East because every time they intervene, it makes things worse, whether it's Egypt, Libya, Israel, Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and now Yemen.
And now Yemen. And the thing is that the U.S. is not making friends. It's making enemies over there. And you can't tell what the blowback from making an enemy will be. It might be,
yeah.
I mean, it might be they're getting a hold of a nuclear weapon, putting it on a freighter or a commercial aircraft and flying it to the U.S. It could be that simple.
Yeah, and America is less safe now than they were before 9/11, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, but go ahead, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, these things don't change. I mean, it's one stupidity after another when you're talking about what the U.S. or other governments do, because you don't get the best and brightest people working for governments. You get the poorest and worst kind of people. But I've distracted myself over the last couple of years in writing a novel, or actually a series of novels. And the first one is out now called Speculator. And I decided to do novels as opposed to nonfiction for several reasons. But a big one is that there are a lot of things that you can say in fiction that you really don't dare to say in nonfiction. So I urge your listeners to go on Amazon and pick up a copy of Speculator. I think they're going to like it. This book, among other things, has already won the Leonard Reed Award for Best Libertarian Fiction of the Year.
Yeah, and I people are comparing your book to Ayn Rand book, so it's gotten a lot of great reviews within the libertarian circle, definitely. And since we're talking about your book, let's talk about your book. Now, this book is set in Africa. So why did you pick Africa? Because I remember when you came to D.C. and when we talked, and you said people should start business in Africa because of a lot of unhidden potential there, and it's underdeveloped.
Exactly. Well, Mo, the thing is that a lot of people today, especially the younger generation, millennials and even Gen Xers, are underemployed or even unemployed. And I think it's very foolish for people to stay in the place where they are, because if you're a young American today, you've got the same education, the same thought patterns, the same background, same connections as millions and millions of others. So you don't have any marginal advantage. And what I recommend is that, especially if you're under 40, go to Africa. Pick a country, any country. Take a choice out of 50. And you'll find yourself on an on-level playing field, a playing field that is tilted to your advantage, because you're going to have things that everybody has in the U.S., but almost nobody has in Africa. So it's possible, because I've done this numerous times, you can be sitting down with the head of the country in a matter of a couple of weeks from hitting the ground. That's not going to happen here in the U.S., and that opens up a lot of doors that can result in a lot of money if you play it right on your part by providing goods and services and so forth, because you'll be unusual. So anyway, Speculator is put in Africa, and my hero is the 23-year-old Charles Knight, who takes $10,000 and through a well-chosen mining exploration stock, he gets lucky, turns it into $1 million, goes to check out the mine, and winds up turning it into $200 million. Now, how that happens, not easy to do, but it's possible. So that's part of what the book is about.
So you talked about a lot about the mining industry in your book. So why did you pick that industry over other industries? Because Africa is largely unexplored, and when it comes to mining for natural resource?
Yeah, I don't recommend the mining industry, incidentally. It's a terrible business. But speculating in mining stocks is a very different thing from investing in mines themselves. So that's one reason. Speculating in mining stocks is the most volatile class of securities on the planet. And I think in the years to come, with trillions of new dollars being created, it's going to result in a bull market in these stocks, most of which are horrible businesses, horrible investments. But I think there's going to be a huge bull market in most of their shares. So that's one reason why I recommend, why I talk about mining. Also, they say that everybody's first novel is somewhat autobiographical. And since I know a lot about the mining business and things related to it, it was natural that I talk about what I really know about. So Speculator is actually an education in speculating, in mining, and in a lot of other things. It's an education in education itself, actually, because my hero, Charles Knight, not only doesn't go to college, which I advise nobody to do unless you're going to learn a trade like doctoring or lawyering or take a hard science where it's helpful to have the formal discipline. But he doesn't even graduate from high school because he figures it's a misallocation of his time. So there's a lot of that type of thing in the novel, too.
So did you write this book within mind of the millennials right now and what they're facing and the challenges that they have in this economy where there's a currency war, all the central banks are printing lots of money, devaluing the currency, and it's high unemployment, not in just the U.S., but all over the world?
Yeah, I think that millennials are actually getting a tough break today. They really are. It's not their fault that the economy is as screwed up as it is, and it's not their fault that the economy is going to fall apart completely in the years to come. So I'm very sympathetic to millennials. And if I was a millennial today, knowing what I know, I would do exactly what I'm recommending in Speculator. I do exactly what I'm recommending there. So I hope people read it and find out. They might save themselves a few years and a lot of money.
And I was listening to your podcast with James Altucher, and you're telling that people shouldn't be a plant. They shouldn't just stay in one area. They should explore and do business outside their comfort zone and where they grew up.
Exactly. The money that people spend to go to college, to get a piece of paper, and have their minds cluttered up with all kinds of mostly nonsense from professors that may know how to teach, but they don't know how to do. Forget about that. I mean, that was arguably a plan for success 50 years ago to go to college. It's not today. Everybody's got a college degree, and college degrees are worthless. And worse than that, most of the people that go to college today don't take something like a hard science or math or something like that. They wind up taking English or history, which are very good things to know. But they're things that you can learn just as easily or more easily by yourself than by sitting in a desk all day. I mean, look, I can tell you from my own experience, when you go to college, half the time you cut the classes. And then when you go to the class, you might fall asleep in it. And if you don't fall asleep, your mind may wander or your notes aren't good. And then you may not even, so you only absorb a few things by osmosis. You can get this education by yourself, with the exception of a few specialties, as I've mentioned. So take all the money that you would spend going to college and use it to travel. By far the best education, and you'll have more fun. There are no disadvantages, lots of advantages, and do it while you're young. I mean, I can't emphasize this more. And it's advice that I think very few millennials get, because their parents are going to say, oh, isn't it dangerous going to that place? Or, oh, you'll be tired and hot and hungry. And all kinds of ridiculous excuses, or you'll just be wasting the time when you come back here and work in your cubicle. So forget about that. That's bad advice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you there. And you visited how many countries? Over 140?
Actually, it's about 155, and I've lived in 10 at this point. Although I'm currently in Aspen, Colorado, because I spend the northern summer here. But in a couple of weeks, I'll be down in Argentina because I like it down there, and I generally spend about half the year in Argentina, Uruguay, South America. But that's not where the opportunity is. The opportunity is in Africa, and that's where the hero of Speculator goes, for good reason.
Yeah, and you gave me an advanced copy of the book, and it's a great read. And if people want to check out the book, they definitely can go to Amazon and buy it from there. So I want to spend the rest of the podcast asking you questions from our listeners and our followers. There's questions regarding the economy, gold, silver, and the election as well. So I'm just going to start off and talk about what's going on in Europe and the Euro Bank, that a lot of them are collapsing. So I have one question from a listener. Even if Deutsche Bank is bailed out, will their enormous derivative books still pose a risk? Most derivatives are interest rate sensitive. If interest rates start to go up, even a little, will any bailout be large enough to honor interest rate sensitive derivative claims?
Yeah, I question that they can make a bailout that big, because how much is on a Deutsche Bank's derivative book? I can't remember the number, but
it's 46 trillion.
Yes, that's correct. Because it's unbelievable. When you get these many zeros, it's hard to keep track. I think pretty soon, if Obama stayed in office for another term, he might have to ask his science advisor what comes after a quadrillion, which incidentally is about the amount of derivatives in the world today. And the problem with the derivatives, several problems. It's that number one, in a soundly run classical bank, the derivatives really would play a minimal role. But these banks are like hedge funds, not like banks today. And if either side of the derivative defaults, this is called counterparty risk, and then the next person defaults, and then the next person defaults, and the next person. It's like a gigantic daisy chain, where if one institution defaults, as Deutsche Bank might with its 40 trillion of derivatives, then everybody else that's doing business with Deutsche Bank is in the jackpot too. So the whole thing can come crashing down. So it's very dangerous. And it's not just Deutsche Bank. Every single bank in Italy, well, this is true of almost every single bank in the world. It's just obvious in Italy right now. They're all bankrupt. And what are they going to do? We're talking about hundreds of billions of euros. The average Italian depositor is oblivious to this. Smart ones are getting their money out of the country right now. But when Guido goes to his bank on some Monday, he might find that he can't get euros out of it. And this could be an earthquake if it happens in an economy the size of Italy. And it can happen in other countries. So, no, it's very, very serious.
And yeah, and Deutsche Bank has a long history. They've been around for a long time. I think someone told me last week that they financed the Nazi Germany back during World War II.
Well, it's been around a long time. That's true. The bank has. But believe it or not, one of their problems is that they owe about, or they've been assessed about, 14 or 15 billion in fines by the U.S. government. And if they were to pay those fines, that alone would wipe out their capital. So there's going to be some compromise made, but still, the U.S. government's going to tag them fair enough in fines to wipe out half of their capital. So I don't see any way out of this at this point. Well, I guess there is a way out of it. I mean, the Europeans could print up, another 50 or 100 billion euros and basically hand it to Deutsche Bank, which is exactly what the U.S. did back in 2008. So, sure. Well, why just stop at 50 or 100 billion? Why not stop at 50 or 100 trillion, or move up to a quadrillion? There's no limit. It's all done by computers. They don't even have to put ink on paper anymore to do this. Although this is the next thing that's happening. It's that paper money is going out of existence. They're getting rid of it all over the world, which means that you'll have no cash, which means you'll have no privacy. Everything that you do is going to be electronic and therefore totally and fully accessible by the authorities. So this is a real problem. So it goes much deeper than just the failure of a few banks.
Yeah, and the government definitely want to get rid of cash, make it easier to track all of the cash inflow and outflow, and also people can't, fudge around when they file their taxes and put down their income less than what it actually is. So that's what the government definitely want with the debit card, credit card, and even the blockchain technology. They want to track everybody's expenses.
You're absolutely right, Mo, and it's part of the ongoing trend of turning everybody into a serf. So the way you solve that is by internationalizing yourself and doing it now while it's still possible, because it's much harder now, I promise you, than it was even 10 years, even 5 years ago, even 2 or 3 years. It gets harder by the week, by the month.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. You could store gold and silver now all over the country with a click of a button now. So it's definitely easy to allocate your asset outside the banking system. So I want to talk about gold and silver. I have a question from one of our listeners. Now, this listener claimed that you think the gold price bottomed at the end of 2015. He wanted to know what indicator made you think that it bottomed at the end of 2015, and you started investing in gold and gold stock late in 2015.
Yeah, that's right. And since then, the average gold stock, which was very, very depressed, a lot of these mining stocks were selling for less than the cash they had in the bank. So, assuming it was a company that had assets, you got the assets for free, the data banks for free, the management for free, and got some cash as a kicker. That's generally a pretty good deal when you can buy a stock on that basis. And since then, of course, gold has gone up about 15, 20%. The world financial situation is much riskier, much shakier than it's ever been in the past. So even though gold isn't as cheap in real terms as it was at the last bottom was, let's say, 2002, when gold was $250 an ounce, roughly. And then in 2001, 2002, it was cheaper in real terms than it was in 1971, when it was $35 before Nixon devalued the dollar. So it's not as cheap in real terms as it was in 1971 or 2002, but the world is in such more perilous shape than it was then that doesn't bother me. So first you buy gold coins, and then after you learn enough about the area, then you buy these mining stocks. There are about 2,000 of them traded in the world, so you have to be selective when you buy them. But and they're speculation, not an investment. Let me emphasize that. But no, as far as I'm concerned, we've almost certainly started a new bull market now.
Yeah, it's been a great year for gold and silver mining stock. A lot of them tripled in prices. Before we had the pullback this past month, a lot of them got hit hard, but still, it's been a great year for gold and silver. It's been up 1.30%. So right now, it's a buying opportunity for people that want to get in on the dip.
I think it is. I think by this time next year and the year after, they're going to be very happy. And by the time gold peaks in this next cycle, over the next 3 or 4 years, I think we're going to see $5,000 gold, maybe more. Who can tell?
Yeah. Who knows? It could go higher than that. So I also want to get your thoughts on 2016 election. Now, I heard that you were a classmate with Bill Clinton at Georgetown. So what are your thoughts on the Clinton and the crime they committed, such as the email, the Clinton Foundation, and the selling arms to terrorist group, and et cetera? What do you think about the Clinton?
Well, I think it's absolutely shameful, and it shows how degraded the political system in the U.S. has become, that we came very close to having a choice between a member of the Clinton dynasty and one of the Bush dynasty, the third Bush. I mean, what is this, like getting to choose between the Tudors and the Stuarts, something like this? This is amazing. So I'm glad that Trump has taken the Republican nomination. Now, make no mistake, he's no libertarian, that's for sure. But the fact that the members of the deep state hate him so viscerally, and it really is. You listen to any news broadcast, with the exception of Fox, which I have problems with also, but or read any editorial, or these people hate him. They compare him with the worst people in history, which is ridiculous. It's mostly lies. I don't vote, of course, but I hope he wins, because he'll overturn the rotten apple cart of all these people within the Beltway and break a lot of rice bowls. And And I think since he thinks like a businessman, he may try to cut expenses, although I think it's probably too late to save things from that point of view. But if the Democrats get elected and then appoint Supreme Court justices and all this type of thing, I mean, this is really a very serious election. I still think Trump could win, quite frankly. It's not going to be good if he wins, but vastly better than if Hillary wins, put it that way.
I still think Hillary Clinton's going to win because I think the establishment's going to do whatever it takes to make sure she wins. But we'll see what happens.
Well, they might stuff the ballot boxes electronically. I mean, this is entirely not only possible, but likely, I think, if it looks like there's going to be an upset for Trump. Because I think the people that voted for Bernie aren't going to vote for Hillary. I think they hate her because they know that she stole the nomination from Sanders. So I still think it's possible. I don't trust the polls because the polls are the same people, the same kind of beltway insiders that are talking heads on the news shows. So I don't trust anything. I don't trust it any more than I trust Argentine inflation statistics that come from the government. It's all phonied up.
Yeah, I agree. And the mainstream media is focusing on what Trump has done in the past, the comments he's made, which is, I don't like it either. But Clinton has done way worse things than Trump has done. I mean, this woman deleted emails.
They're making these accusations, which there doesn't appear to be any proof of. No, I suspect they're mostly lies. And, in fact, Hillary is an actual criminal. I mean, it depends on how far back you want to go and how egregious the things that she's been involved with are. I mean, I guess the first thing was that $100,000 bribe she took disguised as cattle trading profits, which it was an obvious bribe to anybody that knows anything at all about markets. But they don't even bring that up anymore.
Yeah, and she committed a lot of crimes. She should be in jail for the stuff she done. If I did that stuff, I'd be in Guantanamo Bay.
Well, I mean, you got the strange death of Vince Foster, among other things. I mean, to me, that really demands a reopening of the case. There's about 50 different reasons why there should have been a major investigation of that death. About 50 separate things, but there wasn't. They had the park police do a brief investigation, and everybody drove on. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think everybody in the FBI wanted to prosecute her because they believed they had enough evidence to do so, but someone higher up said no. So that's very interesting.
Oh yeah, and Comey should be indicted for corruption too, as the head of the FBI, which is really just nothing but a bureaucracy itself. And it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, even Obama had done some criminal things as well. I mean, look what he did in Yemen. So, I mean, all the presidents and politicians had broken a lot of laws, and yet they get away with it. It's a sad world we live in right now.
Yes, it is. But these are going to be very interesting times, and I'm increasingly pleased that I'll be watching it on my widescreen in Argentina, as opposed to out my front window here in the U.S.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So one final question from a listener, and I'll let you go. A big part of being an investor and an entrepreneur is taking losses. This listener would like to know, what was your most memorable loss, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, God, I've had so many losses, frankly. You've got to do more due diligence before you put a nickel anywhere. And sometimes I found myself being too cavalier about buying things. Because usually when I buy stocks, I typically don't buy out of the market. I typically buy in the form of private placements, which there are benefits to doing that. You typically get a warrant, which doubles your upside potential, and you buy at a discount to the market, which is helpful. But you're locked up for X number of months or even a year or more. So this underlines the importance of really investigating the company. Who are the people that run it? What's the property that they have? What's their business? All this type of thing. I'd say the investigation is important of the companies. And we publish some newsletters that people might want to investigate. If they go to kcresearch.com, we have a lot of free publications, which I think are quite good, actually, but also paid publications if people want to go into more detail. But that's the big thing. Do more thinking before as opposed to thinking after you make the investment.
Now, you recently sold KC Research to Stanberry Research, but you're still part of KC Research. I noticed you still contribute content once in a while.
Yeah, no, I contribute quite a bit of content, actually. I just can't help myself. And Porter Stansberry and his team are a force of nature. So I sold most of the company to them, but I'm very happy I did that. It's better to have a smaller percentage of a huge pie than a bigger percentage of a small pie. So that's why I did it. And I don't have to work as hard anymore. I can't help myself from doing it anyway, but I don't have to, which is nice.
So you're in semi-retirement mode right now?
I just do what I want to do. I mean, I'm still, very involved with our real estate development in Argentina. If they Google me and put in Argentina, people can take a look at that and see if they want to come down and visit, because I'm there half of the year. I'm working on these novels, because this time next year, my second novel, which is called Drug Lord, because our hero, Charles Knight, is reforming the unjustly besmirched reputations of 6 highly politically incorrect occupations. So Speculator is this novel, and this time next year we'll be talking about Drug Lord, which explains the legal and illegal drug business, all about it, and then Assassin, where we explore the occupation of being an assassin, the morality, the history, techniques, so forth. So that's what I'm doing, actually, Mo. So it's not a regular job working in a cubicle, but I'm doing that. It's work.
Yeah, and people want to find out more about your work and what you do, they can go to kcresearch.com. Is that correct?
Yes, and I've got a lot of articles that I posted there. And we've got a lot of free blogs, which are actually quite good. And you ought to look at internationalman.com. That's where I actually do most of my stuff, internationalman.com, because that was my first book that became the largest selling book in the history of Rhodesia, a record that will never be broken, incidentally.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Why did you decide to sell the book in that country?
Well, it was published here in the U.S. in, let me see, was it 1977? And I was in South Africa. I went up to Rhodesia, and war was on full blast. I think I was the only tourist there who wasn't heavily armed. And, I did what I always do. I opened up the yellow pages to see who I might want to talk to. Saw that there were a couple of publishers. Got together with one, made a deal with them. And when I came back, I became kind of a local celebrity in Salisbury, which was the capital. It's now Harare. But I just went back to Zimbabwe, about 4 or 5 months ago. And, I'm still well known in Zimbabwe and spent most of that time meeting with government officials and so forth. Didn't get to see Mugabe because he was in Singapore on a medical thing. But, that's why. It's just a target of opportunity. Going back to what I said earlier, your listeners ought to look at Africa because nobody else goes there. That's why they should go there. That's why I found the opportunity I did when I was there years ago.
Even South Africa?
That would be last on my list because it's way too developed.
Yeah.
So you'll have much less of a marginal advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. South Africa is a big communist state right now, and it's in a disaster mode.
It's too big. There's all kinds of reasons why you can make a better choice in South Africa.
Right. Well, Doug, thank you for your time. I appreciate your time. You always have great stories to tell. Do you keep in touch with Bill Clinton?
No.
Oh.
No. Lots of mutual friends, but I mean, if he goes to jail, which he should, I'd like to visit him there.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Doug. I appreciate it.
Okay, Mo. Pleasure.